The UEMS Nightingale drifted in the void, its white hull gleaming under the distant light of a blue star. A beacon of neutrality, the hospital ship bore no weapons, only the universal insignia of mercy, an interwoven circle and cross, known to every species as a promise of aid without bias. Inside its sterile corridors, the air smelled of antiseptic and recycled oxygen, the hum of machinery blending with the hushed voices of medics tending to the wounded. Dr. Elizabeth Raines tightened the straps on her surgical gloves, her fingers stiff from hours of delicate work. The patient before her, a reptilian Grail soldier, lay unconscious, his wounds freshly sealed with regenerative gel. The war had dragged on for nearly a decade, a conflict of politics and territory, but none of that mattered in this room. Here, the only battle was against death itself. Across from her, Dr. Arun Patel checked the vitals, his brow furrowed. "He'll make it," he murmured, though exhaustion weighed on his voice. 3 more today alone. We're running out of supplies. Elizabeth sighed, pulling off her gloves. "We weren't supposed to be near the front lines this long. Command was supposed to send an escort weeks ago." The words carried unspoken tension. The United Terran Confederation had promised protection, yet the Nightingale remained alone, floating between warring factions, relying on old diplomatic agreements and blind hope. A hope that had never been tested. Until now. The first warning came as a sharp tremor beneath their feet. Surgical tools clattered onto the floor. A heartbeat later, the emergency klaxons screamed to life, red lights washing over the room. The ship's AI, an unflappable voice, spoke over the intercom. Unidentified vessels approaching. Communications compromised. All hands to emergency stations. Elizabeth's stomach turned to ice. Patel looked at her wide-eyed. "Pirates!" Before she could answer, the ship lurched violently. A deafening boom reverberated through the hull. The sound of metal tearing echoed in the distance, followed by a gut-wrenching shudder that sent both doctors stumbling. Then the lights flickered. Elizabeth forced herself upright, gripping the medbay console. Her earpiece crackled, a panicked voice cutting through the static. "This is Captain Halloway. Asterisk, asterisk, we are under attack. Asterisk, asterisk, they're firing on us. Repeat, we are." The transmission dissolved into shrieks of static. The Vrax Dominion. It had to be them. No other species would dare violate a humanitarian zone so brazenly. The Nightingale had no defenses, no shield strong enough to withstand a barrage. The corridors erupted into chaos as medics rushed to secure patients, some dragging wounded soldiers toward lifeboats. The bulkheads groaned under another impact. Elizabeth grabbed Patel's wrist. "We need to move. Now." They sprinted toward the primary ward, dodging sparks that rained from overhead conduits. A medic stumbled past them, his uniform soaked in crimson, not from a patient but his own wounds. Then the hull breached. A violent roar split the air as metal twisted apart, exposing the ship's interior to the abyss. A section of the hallway collapsed, the void beyond pulling everything into its grasp. Elizabeth barely had time to grab a wall-mounted safety bar, Patel gripping her arm as bodies were swept into space, their silent screams vanishing into the vacuum. And then they arrived. Vrax warriors in black armor poured through the breach, their curved rifles spitting red-hot plasma. They moved without hesitation, gunning down medical staff as if they were combatants. Elizabeth pulled Patel into a side corridor, her breath sharp and ragged. "They're boarding us." Patel's face was pale. "Why?" "There's nothing to take here. This is a hospital ship." The answer came in the form of a guttural voice from the main ward. A Vrax commander stood over a fallen patient, the wounded soldier reaching out weakly. Without a moment's pause, the alien raised his boot and crushed the man's skull against the floor. Asterisk, mercy is weakness. Asterisk, the Vrax commander turned, his blood-slicked armor gleaming. Asterisk, let this be a lesson to your species. Asterisk, Elizabeth gritted her teeth, rage burning through the fear. This wasn't a raid. It was a message. A hand gripped her shoulder, Patel, his eyes dark with grief. "We can't stop them. We have to get to the escape pods. A scream tore through the corridor. A nurse, Elena Vasquez, had been spotted. She ran, but a plasma bolt caught her in the back, sending her crumpling to the floor. The stench of burned flesh filled the air. Elizabeth clenched her fists, helplessness threatening to consume her. But she knew Patel was right. They ran. The escape pod bay was ahead, the doors half open. A handful of survivors were already there. 2 nurses, a tech officer, and a wounded Marine clutching his bleeding side. Patel helped the soldier into one of the pods, while Elizabeth activated the launch sequence. The ship shuddered violently. Through a viewport, she saw fire bloom from the midsection of the Nightingale. The medbay, her medbay, was gone. Over the intercom, Captain Halloway's voice crackled through one last time, his words barely audible over the destruction. Asterisk to any Terran vessel. Nightingale is lost. They're slaughtering us. Asterisk a cough, then a strained whisper. Asterisk, humanity will never forgive this. Asterisk, the transmission cut. Elizabeth stepped into the pod, her chest tight with fury. She took one last look through the viewport as the launch sequence finalized. The Nightingale, the ship that had saved thousands of lives, burned in the void. She burned with it. The escape pod's thrusters ignited, sending them hurtling into the black. Through the viewport, Elizabeth saw the Vrax ships turn, retreating as if they had accomplished their purpose. No looting, no prisoners, just devastation left in their wake. A quiet beep signaled an outgoing transmission. The tech officer, his hands shaking, turned to her. Dr. Rains, I sent a distress call. Hopefully, someone will hear it. She stared at him, then at the stars beyond. Oh, they'll hear it. Her voice was hollow, but beneath it, something simmered. Humanity had been merciful. Now it would never be again. The distress signal spread through human space like wildfire, carried across relay stations and deep space comm arrays until it reached Earth. What had begun as a single, desperate transmission from a dying ship became a rallying cry for an entire species. Footage of the UEMS Nightingale, broken and burning, played on every news feed, its shattered hull a silent testament to the atrocity committed. The screams of its crew, the cold-blooded execution of the wounded. These images were burned into the minds of billions. Humanity had endured much since it first stepped into the stars. Wars, betrayals, and diplomatic struggles had forged the United Terran Confederation into a pragmatic force, tempered by experience. But through it all, they had adhered to one principle. War was a last resort. The Vrax Dominion had just removed that option. In the heart of Earth's military headquarters, Fleet Admiral Jonathan Kane watched the footage in silence. He was a man of iron discipline, his features carved from years of war and hard decisions. Around him, high-ranking officials murmured in barely contained rage, voices rising as debates turned to demands. Some called for sanctions, others for diplomacy. But Kane knew better. This was not a political maneuver. This was a declaration of war. He rose to his full height, silencing the room with a single word. Enough. The room stilled. Every eye turned to him, waiting. Kane let the silence settle. Let the weight of the moment sink in. The Vrax Dominion believes us weak, he said, his voice steady, measured. They believe we will bow, that we will retreat, that we will hesitate in the face of slaughter. They think we're too bound by morality to respond in kind. He took a step forward, hands braced against the table, his gaze hard as steel. They are wrong. A murmur swept through the council, anger shifting into something colder, more focused. Kane didn't need to elaborate. The room understood. Humanity had been given no choice. Orders went out within the hour. Across human space, shipyards roared to life, production lines shifting from maintenance to full wartime assembly. The largest fleet in human history began to mobilize. Battle-hardened officers, reserve forces, and even civilian contractors poured into the war effort. The UTC had fought conflicts before, but nothing like this. This was not a campaign. This was retribution. Asterisk, asterisk. From the outer colonies to the core worlds, warships converged on the Sol system. The fleet grew in strength by the day. Dreadnoughts, stealth frigates, AI-driven carriers, each vessel a product of human ingenuity and ruthless efficiency. Tactics were refined, battle simulations run, every possible scenario analyzed with unyielding precision. They were not going to strike out of anger. They were going to annihilate the Vrax with methodical, calculated force. Kane stood on the bridge of the UTCS Retribution, the fleet's flagship, as final preparations were made. Below him, Earth's surface gleamed like a distant jewel, untouched by war. He intended to keep it that way. A communication officer turned from her console. "Sir, we're receiving a message from the Vrax Dominion." The words hung in the air. The Vrax had remained silent since the attack, issuing no demands, no justifications. Now, as Earth's war machine stood on the edge of full mobilization, they had finally decided to speak. Kane folded his arms. "Put it through." The main display flickered to life, revealing the snarling visage of High Warlord Kordak, Supreme Commander of the Vrax military. His dark eyes gleamed with amusement, his sharp teeth bared in something akin to a smirk. "Humans," Kordak rumbled. "You're slow to respond. I had expected your outrage days ago." Kane's expression did not change. "Is this a confession, Warlord? Or are you here to justify your cowardice?" Kordak chuckled. "Cowardice? No, Admiral. Strength. You pride yourselves on honor, on mercy. We merely tested the depth of that weakness." His eyes gleamed. "And we found it wanting." Silence filled the bridge. The crew held their breath. Kane did not. "You believe you understand humanity," he said softly. "That was your first mistake." Kordak tilted his head, intrigued. "And my second?" Kane's voice was ice, leaving survivors. The transmission cut. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Kane turned to his officers, his tone calm, measured. "Launch the fleet." The order rippled through the command structure like a tidal wave. Engines roared to life, carriers releasing their fighter wings as the armada surged forward. The void of space filled with the glow of thousands of warships, their path clear. The first target was Vega Prime, a Vrax-controlled outpost on the edge of their territory. Strategically significant, heavily defended. Perfect for making a statement. The assault began with the precision of a scalpel. The UTC fleet struck from the darkness, using stealth ships to disable communications before the main forces arrived. By the time the Vrax realized what was happening, human warships were already in their orbit. Aboard the UTCS Thunderclap, Captain Elena Saito led the first attack wing. Her ships cut through the Vrax defenses with ruthless efficiency, bombers targeting key supply lines while destroyers rained fire on planetary defenses. Within hours, the once impenetrable outpost lay in ruins, its command centers reduced to ash. The survivors were not slaughtered. They were made to watch. Captured officers were forced to see the wreckage of their fleet, to witness what happened when humanity was provoked beyond reason. No speeches, no warnings, only the aftermath of their arrogance. The message was clear. This was only the beginning. Back aboard the Retribution, Kane watched as reports came in. The mission was a success. The Vrax had been caught off guard, their defenses crumbling in the face of a force they had vastly underestimated. A transmission request flashed across the command screen. This time it was not from the Vrax. It was from Dr. Elizabeth Rains. Kane nodded to his officer. "Put her through." The screen flickered, revealing the doctor's weary face. Her uniform was stained, her expression worn but resolute. "Admiral," she said, her voice steadier than he expected. "I wanted to see it for myself." Kane met her gaze. "You have." She exhaled, nodding. "Then keep going." The fleet pressed on. This was no longer a war of politics. This was no longer a conflict of ideologies. This was vengeance. And vengeance had just begun. The Vrax Dominion had never known fear. Conquest was their nature, or their birthright. They had raised worlds, broken empires, crushed civilizations that dared resist. But never had they faced humanity like this. Across the Dominion, human warships descended like fire from the void. Vega Prime had been the first to fall, but it was not the last. UTC forces swept through the border colonies with cold, relentless precision, reducing military outposts to debris and erasing supply chains in coordinated strikes. The humans did not fight for territory or resources. They fought for something deeper, something the Vrax had never accounted for. Rage. In the Dominion's capital, High Warlord Kordak stood before his war council, his claws digging into the armrests of his throne. Reports flooded the chamber. *** destroyed fleets, captured generals, shattered defenses. *** the humans gave no quarter. They accepted no surrender. They moved with the terrifying efficiency of a species that had cast aside diplomacy for raw vengeance. A Vrax strategist stepped forward, his scales tinged with unease. The humans do not fight as expected, Warlord. They. Kordak's snarl silenced him. He already knew. The humans had learned their war doctrine, but they did not follow it. They adapted, striking unpredictably, shifting tactics in ways the Dominion had never encountered. The old ways of war, the overwhelming force that had always secured Vrax victories, ** meant nothing against an enemy that refused to fight conventionally. ***. And then came the message. A transmission, not from Earth, but from a captured outpost. The screen flickered, revealing Fleet Admiral Kane. His expression was unreadable, his uniform crisp, his steel-gray eyes cold as the void. Behind him, the wreckage of a Vrax command station smoldered, its banners torn, its warriors lifeless. Kane spoke without preamble. You thought humanity was weak. His voice was steady, but beneath it lurked something darker. You thought we would hesitate, that we would grieve, protest, negotiate. He leaned forward, the shadows sharpening his features. But we are not here to negotiate. Kordak bared his teeth. Then what do you want, human? Kane did not blink. Justice. The screen cut. Silence gripped the war council. No ultimatums, no demands. Only certainty. Humanity would not stop. And they didn't. In the depths of space, the UTCS Retribution led the final assault. Vrax fleets gathered near their homeworld, desperate to stem the tide. It was their last stand. On the bridge, Kane studied the tactical display. The Vrax had committed everything. Hundreds of warships, orbital defenses, planetary cannons. Against a different enemy, it might have been enough. But humanity had already decided. Beside him, Captain Elena Saito watched the battle unfold, her hands steady on the controls. They're positioning for a defensive siege, she observed. They want us to break against their walls. Kane nodded. Then we won't break. We'll erase them. The order was given. The fleet did not engage in a prolonged siege. They cut through. Stealth bombers slipped past the defensive line, delivering pinpoint strikes to critical infrastructure. AI-guided missiles shredded planetary defenses before they could fully charge. The Vrax's strategy crumbled beneath the sheer adaptability of human warfare. In the capital city, chaos erupted. The mighty war machine of the Dominion, the unshakable force that had once subjugated entire species, collapsed in a matter of hours. And in the throne room, Kordak watched it all. Smoke curled through the corridors, the alarms shrieking their final warnings. His warriors had fallen. His fleets were wreckage drifting in the void. The Dominion was dead. He turned, his footsteps echoed through the hall. Dr. Elizabeth Raines stepped forward, her white medical coat stained with battle. She was no soldier, but she had survived the Nightingale. She had watched her colleagues die, had held the hands of the wounded as they breathed their last. And now, she stood before the architect of that massacre. Kordak exhaled slowly. You have won, human. Elizabeth stared at him. We weren't fighting for victory. She raised the pistol. Kordak closed his eyes. A single shot rang through the ruined palace. Outside, the human fleet loomed over the broken world. The war was over, but humanity would never be the same.